Baila Bayanla Chok Hürmitli Konjugla. This is my presentation about the history of pilgrimage to Cudi, the mountain of the Ark. Bilin meyen bir kral reliefi ve Cudida na yapilan hach tsiyaretinin tarihi. I hope this was okay. The first Noah and Cudi Mountain Symposium in Sirnak in 2013 was an important event in the history of researching the flood and Noah's Ark. The spotlights turned from the Agreda, often called Ararat in Christian communities, towards the Cudi that is most likely the real landing place. We could just see out of the windows of the Serinu Hotel. When we look out of the windows, we saw that beautiful mountain shape. And we shared our knowledge for the first time about Noah, the Ark and the flood on an academic level. It was once of an impressive journey of my lifetime. My book, Das Rätsel der Arche Noah, was published after this symposium in 2014. Unfortunately, it's only in German. In the last few years, we find Cudi in an increasing number of publications worldwide. For example, The Ark Before Noah by Irving Finkel of the British Museum, or A Flood of Evidence by American creationists who were responsible for building a life-size ark in Kentucky. So it is obvious that Cudi is no longer a forgotten sacred place. One of the most important lectures in the symposium in 2013 was about Chat Curieux by Professor Baz. He presented new evidence and photographs of some rock reliefs of Assyrian kings engraved on the Cudi Mountains about 2,700 years ago. This was very valuable for my own research and the publishing of my book. The discussion about it reached even the world's best-selling biblical archaeological review. A photograph taken by Professor Ibrahim Baz at Cudi was printed in November 2014. These carvings take us to a trip far back in time, following the footprints of the Pilgrims to Noah and the Ark. Yes, they might be the oldest archaeological evidences of pilgrimage to Cudi, the mountain which is now well known for being the landing place of the Ark. Follow me on a journey along with the pilgrims throughout the centuries and millennia. When I attended at a symposium 2013, me and my friends Bill Krause, Mark Wilson, Gordon Franz and John Baumgartner hoped to reach the Safine, the landing place of the Ark. But because of unpredictable circumstances, the trip to the summit of Cudi couldn't take place. However, some local inhabitants made it to the top in that year, put their feet exactly on the place where Noah might have dwelt some 1,000 years before. And they prayed. They lined up with the ancient pilgrims in search of our forefather Noah. In 2020, the Turkish army secured the summit of Mount Cudi during a military campaign. Soldiers and politicians prayed within the sacred walls of the Safine then. Did the Ark really exist, and did a real ship land on this mountain? I believe so. And one of the most important hints to the credibility of the holy stories is the testimony of the famous historian Josephus Flavius. 4 times he points to the existing remains of the Ark in his times, 2,000 years ago. However, even in later times, eyewitnesses were mentioned in literature, and legends of rotten nails survived until the 20th century and even until today. The question must therefore be asked, can we still find pieces of Noah's Ark today? Despite the fact that no remains of the Ark can be seen upon the surface of the Safine, at least on the many photographs I have seen myself, remains under the surface might be located by geophysical investigations. Yet, no progress has been made in this issue since the last symposium in 2013, but we hope the future might bring opportunities to do archaeological research on the summit of Cudi. In 1889, Bill Krause visited the monastery of Echmiadzin and examined a relic which is said to contain a piece of Noah's Ark as it was collected in the 1st century AD by the Saint Jacob, Bishop of Nusaybin. As we know from historical record, Jacob was never at Agreda, but he has been on Mount Cudi. The relic is very old and might possibly be a relic of the Ark. A reader of my book visited a monastery, Mor Augin, in 2014, and it is believed that one of the beams inside that monastery might be brought from Cudi and originates from the Ark. The founder of this monastery, Saint Eugene, went to Cudi with Saint Jacob of Nusaybin, and so it is possible that he also brought some wood of the Ark to his place. Friedrich Bender was a German geologist who visited the summit of Cudi in 1954 and did a small excavation with 2 local guides. What he found was pea-sized little decayed wooden remains. Most of these wooden pieces were cemented by an asphalt or tar-like substance. A group of explorers from Germany went to the top of Mount Cudi in 1983. As a gift from their local guide, they received small pieces of crumbly darkish material considered to be amulets. Hans Thoma gave me one of these pieces in 2009. We examined it in the laboratory. It may not be petrified wood, but indeed it might be rock that was destroyed by the catastrophe of what took place at Mount Cudi in 766 AD, when the monastery of the Ark burned down. This was some of the outcome of the laboratory. Now let's take a look on the history of pilgrims of Noah and to the Ark. Hans Thoma and Friedrich Bender were 2 of the explorers of Cudi I presented in 2013. Gertrude Bell and Stephen Compton also were on Mount Cudi as foreigners in the last 150 years. They went there not as pilgrims, but wanted to examine the sacred place which fascinated them for one reason or another. Nevertheless, there were pilgrims in the past centuries on Cudi, and a lot of them. We were told that at least until the 1910s, there was a tradition of believers of different faiths coming to the ruins of the top of the mountain once a year. A photograph of a large group of pilgrims is recorded from the 1950s. A festival in honor of the prophet Noah was celebrated by believers of different nations and religions. When conflicts and terror increased in the area, this tradition disappeared, but hopefully will flourishing again in the future. Many pilgrims are recorded over the centuries, seeing remains of the Ark, remembering Noah and building churches and mosques on the summit and down in the valleys. Bill Krause gave an overview in his paper he presented here in 2013 and which is collected in this book. There were bishops and scholars among them. The place has also been an important spiritual site in pre-Muslim and pre-Christian times. Turning back to Josephus, we know that existing remains had great religious significance. He writes, citing Berosus, who lived about 400 years before him, that some people carry off pieces of bitumen which they take away and use chiefly as amulets for averting the mischief. So it is very likely that in those times many pilgrims removed pieces of wood from the ark as amulets. As we step back in time further, records have survived from the Mesopotamian empires, which allow us to reconstruct the events, wars and religious convictions of the Assyrians and Babylonians some 2,700 years ago. King Sennacherib of Assyria ordered his stone carvers to produce multiple reliefs and inscriptions. Some of his inscriptions tell us about amulets to bring on rain and to keep disease from approaching man, which was brought from the foot of Mount Nippur. This Mount Nippur is indeed the same as Dagh, where 6 rock reliefs was found showing Sennacherib praying and worshipping his gods. Jewish tradition tells us that a piece of Noah's Ark was brought to the king's temple in Nineveh and should be identified with what the Bible calls the god Nisroch. Assyriologist Irving Finkel suggests that an ark hunting event might be connecting to Sennacherib. Gordon Franz illuminated this topic very extensively at a 2013 symposium. A new examination of the bas-reliefs of Nineveh by Joshua Jeffers revealed that some of them represent the 5th campaign of Sennacherib aimed at enemies to the north of the Assyrian heartland in the Zagros mountain range. Some of the slabs might match very well the topographic landscape south of Mount Nippur, which is Dagh. You can see a mountainous area with a river and obviously an island. Could this be the river Tigris and ancient Chisre? There is a rather uncommon palace or temple on the top of the hills, sheltered by an upper and lower fortress, unlike other Urartian buildings displayed on the pictures of Nineveh. Could this be a very special holy place? Is this possibly an image of the ark itself? What do those Assyrian soldiers are cutting off in front of this building? It might be trees, but on the other hand, could that be beams from what they cut off, wood as relics? Beams of the ark? Do they take it away from the holy place to the temple of their king, as the Jewish legend tells us? At the bottom of the hills we see vine branches and doves, symbols unmistakably call to mind the biblical account of Noah settling in the new world after the flood. Now we finally return to a special relief from Mount Cudi, recorded by Professor Bass and published in Biblical Archaeology Review. We have this one unique relief, which most obviously is not Sennacherib, as has seen in other sculptures, but an earlier king. There are some suggestions which king it might be. My own suggestion is a little bit daring. I discovered striking visual similarities on a pedestal showing the Middle Assyrian king Tukulti-Ninurta I worshipping in front of the very same pedestal which is displayed. There are arguments against my theory, and I will continue to discuss this issue with some scholars. However, the identity of the unknown kings remains unsolved for the moment, but if it is indeed Tukulti-Ninurta I, we might see here on that pedestal pieces of the ark, a board and nail. However, this is speculation. Now we follow far back into the times immemorial. As we know, was Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk. He believed Noah Utnapishtim, which might be located in a very ancient mountainous area named Aratta. And Aratta is the biblical name for Ararat, and it's directly north of Mesopotamian lowlands, where Dagh is the very first mountain ridge. Gilgamesh did not obtain immortality, and also Utnapishtim Noah died at a very old age, as we learn from the Bible. But Gilgamesh might have been the very first pilgrim to visit Noah during the history of mankind. We know events from the time of Noah from even earlier times in the epic Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta. which tells us a story about the biblical Nimrod maybe. And so we are very close in the time of Noah, which we know from our sacred scriptures. This is what most current scholars would not even have deemed possible. Finally, we traveled back in history from prayer gatherings in present times and have encountered the pilgrims in the 20th centuries and get far back to the Assyrian kings and even more ancient rulers of Uruk, including the heroes of the epic of Gilgamesh and Nimrod, most of them in search for Noah, the Ark, and divine immortality. And at the end of our journey lies yet another important discovery. All nations and religion seem to have a common origin in the times of Noah. Is he and his family the ancestor of all mankind? I believe so. So maybe we should try to look at this mountain, Cudi Dagh, to remember and worship our God and Creator. And we may live in peace with our brothers and sisters on this earth, whatever nationality or religion they might have. We are all His creation and all are children of God. This insight could be a spiritual treasure of the Ark and a foundation for common research and pilgrimage to Noah and the Cudi Dagh in the future. Bayla il ginitz ichin teseculer.
Thank you, Mr. Timo. See you later.
Thank you for your contribution.
Time.
Thank you for your contribution. It was a pleasure having you here today. Thank you.